在国外见到人的第一个问题通常都是 How are you？ 但这个问题呢，问的人好像不是很在乎对方的答案，回应的人好像也不会说实话，所以这个问题是不是有点浪费时间呢？如果是这样子的话，那应该问些什么呢？Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. An interesting Harvard research paper came out talking about how small talk can make people more likable. And while we've talked a lot about the virtues of small talk, today we want to get into what we learned not to do from that research. In that research, the most important thing to build a connection and become more likable is to ask follow-up questions that are meaningful. And that specifically means not asking questions like, how are you?
How are you 这个问题呢，你是不是被问了大概上千万次了？那当然我们自己也可能会常常问这个问题，但是如果你仔细想想，当人家问你这个问题的时候，你是不是都觉得你应该要回答一个答案，那个答案可能不是实际的这个答案。那你在问人家的时候，你是不是真心想要知道对方是否最近怎么样？那其实我在国外工作的时候，就常常发现这个问题好像是一个It's like a robotic question because they seriously don't really care about how you're doing. And I will never ever tell the truth. 因为我发现就算我可能那一天心情不是很好，但是如果我讲了实话的话，好像 it like got me into trouble before. This is a really weird question.
It is a really weird question, and I think it throws a lot of people off early on because I always joke after teaching this to tons of children and the fact that it is the first thing that I think every single English learner in Taiwan gets, the hi, how are you?
I'm
fine.
Thank you. And you?
Right. I used to joke that if you were in a large crowd and yelled out, hi, how are you? All the Taiwanese just by default would yell out, I'm fine, thank you, and you. But the reality is, in the US, this is not a genuine question. This is just a statement. It is essentially the equivalent of hi or hello. And what that means is that we instinctively say it as a way to say hi, but it's really not a conversation opener.
Yeah, it's not.
Even though it's at the beginning of a conversation. And so with the research study that came out, they talked a lot about like, how do you ask meaningful questions that can open conversation rather than taking these default or instinctive questions where someone will maybe not give you a genuine answer, or they will just see that as a general greeting that does not require further response.
Yeah, exactly. If someone asked me, hey, how are you? I probably would just say, I'm good, and then moved on. I don't think I would stick around, ask more questions because I would feel that this person probably doesn't really care about how I'm doing. So in this research, it actually talks about some tips on how do you build that genuine conversation by asking good questions.
A few examples of these good questions can be found in our episode last week, where we talk about questions that can help you to know someone better. And one thing that all of these questions follow is something called the ACT criteria. ACT, A-C-T, standing for authenticity, connection, and a topic that will give them a taste of who you are.
那当然我觉得 authenticity 这也是我们常常在提倡的一个很重要的观念，不管是在什么样的情况之下， being authentic, it's incredibly important in the long term. 可能会觉得说 short term 来讲你想要 build a connection 但是其实所有的 connection 都是要从 long term perspective. You know, you have to look at it from a long term perspective. So being authentic, the question needs to be authentic. It needs to come from your heart. I think that's what it's talking about, right? Be genuinely curious about someone's life. Be genuinely passionate about knowing your coworkers.
If you get that authenticity piece right, the second two parts of ACT, building a connection and giving them a taste of who you are, will flow both ways. Because when people feel that you're open and willing to answer questions about yourself, they are willing to be open and answer questions about who they really are as well. So a few examples of ACT-style questions would be something like, what's your current state of mind?
I really like this question because it's a really different take on how are you, right? Because current state of mind, that could just mean 你现在的心情是怎么样, like asking about your emotion right now or how you're feeling right now. So it's more specific to this person and it shows that you're very caring. 感受得到这个人是很关心人的。
Or if you connect that to a recent event or the current thing that you are doing. One of the problems with how are you is it's a very general statement about what's the time period, what's the context. So I'm just going to gloss over that. But if I ask someone like, how do you feel about this meeting? How did you feel about that event? You're more likely to get a real answer because it's something that they can quantify really quickly and give you back something.
I think that's a really good point. Like 要聚焦一点在可能刚刚所发生的事情上面。
Another example of an ACT question would be, what are you looking forward to this week?
I like this one because it's slightly different from what are your plans for this week? And I feel like what are your plans for this week? Again, that's a very common question. 但是当你在问人家 what are your plans for this week? 通常好像这个 plan 可能并不是他会真的想要做的事情. Sometimes like cleaning the house and they will just give you like chores.
Right. It's more like they're just listing off their schedule as opposed to talking about something meaningful. When you want to have effective small talk, it's about finding meaningfulness within the conversation. So if you ask, oh, what's your plans for this week? Or what are you up to this week? You are most likely to get a schedule or someone who doesn't want to tell you a schedule. So they'll just be like, oh, nothing really.
Yeah, exactly. 大部分的人可能说 oh, I'm just going to stay at home, nothing. 或者他们觉得 oh, my weekend's going to be so boring. I don't want to tell you what I'm going to do. It's embarrassing that it's so boring. So I really like this. What are you looking for this week? You can get a taste of this person. What are they like? What their like and dislikes. So I really like this question.
Our final example of an ACT question was more of like a statement, but consider it a conversation opener. Like, you remind me of a celebrity, but I can't exactly pick out which one. Is there anyone that you feel you really relate to?
I like this question a lot. And I don't know about you, but I often look at someone that I don't know and I try to link it to a celebrity. I really do. So, 而且我觉得大部分的人会觉得，我跟如果哪一个名人长得很像，或者是讲话声音非常像的话，我觉得大家都蛮喜欢的啦。It's flattering to look or sound like a celebrity.
As long as you don't choose anyone infamous or be like, wow, you really remind me of this terrible person. That's not a connection people want to have, but they look like a certain celebrity. It can be flattering. If they have some mannerisms or enjoyment, then that's always something that you can build a conversation around. But aside from asking ACT questions, there's a few other simple ways to build more meaningful conversations. And back to that authenticity and building a connection, when people share news or when you want to share news, it's not just about what are world events or what's happening the most often. Sometimes it's about sharing news that actually happened to you as a way to spark conversation.
我觉得很多人不太想要讲自己，比如说自己发生什么事情，因为觉得 I had a really boring weekend. Why would I want to share my news? But to be really honest, I think no one's life is boring. That's really just in our head. So by sharing what we did, even if it's mundane, people will find it interesting because they will get to know who you are.
that, and oftentimes they may pick up an interesting tidbit that they can connect with. So, for example, if you have kids and you take them out for the weekend, you may find out that someone else that you're having a quick conversation with also needs ideas for how to entertain their kids over the weekend. So what may just seem as like, oh, well, we went to a park, may quickly turn into is like, oh, what are the best parks for taking kids? You know, we always get stuck going to the same place. Or if there's an event or a TV show that you've watched recently, rather than just being like, oh, I just stayed home and watched TV. Bringing up that like, yeah, I've been watching Succession. I don't know if you've seen that or not. And then that can spark a conversation about, you know, is it worth watching that show? Or what is something that other people would recommend diving into?
Now, the next tidbits, it's something I actually really like, is to talk early. So what does it actually mean? 如果你是一个比较内向一点点的人，你可能不是那么喜欢在这种社交场合或者做一些 small talk。我觉得 small talk 会本身来讲，它是个比较困难的一件事情。So talk early means that you get your words or your questions out early. So establish your voice in that group or in that situation. And this is something I did consistently when I was in the States, when I was at school, when I was in a company, because I often feel like I'm such an introvert. I don't have really good question to ask, but I would counteract that by just asking questions the first day of class or the first 30 minutes of the meeting just to establish my voice.
Another thing that you can do to show your control or your ability to engage in small talk is be the person who pivots over to business talk. One of the things that often happens and why people get a bit anxious or don't really enjoy small talk is there are times where it just keeps going too long and they want to get to business, but now they feel awkward of being the person to switch. But if someone's a really good conversationalist and they know how to ask the follow-up questions, they know how to be genuine, they can also be the person who can direct the flow of the conversation. So being the person who can find that right moment, you know, like, oh, I would really love to hear more about your new dog, but I want to jump into this meeting so that everyone can get back to their day.
Yeah, exactly. Or it seems like everyone is here in the room. Let's get started. I know everyone has other stuff they have to do.
Or just finding that moment to close the other conversations. Be like, I would love for you to email me that list of books that you've been reading. I would love to jump into it, but let's jump into this meeting first so that we can get on.
Yeah. I think that's a really good trick to end a conversation. Oh, email me the link or share that with me after the meeting, right? You're like subtly hinting them, let's start the meeting.
Yeah, let's start. But it also feels like, oh, I really listened to what you had to say. Yeah. I'm genuinely connected and I want to follow up, but you know, let's move on.
Yeah, exactly.
We hope that you enjoyed this brief look of how to ask better questions and move beyond those less meaningful interactions, starting with how are you or what are you doing this week, and getting into the questions that build authenticity, show a connection, and give people a taste of who you are. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.